Welcome to Central Ohio, TTN, our writers group presentation. We have a wonderful program tonight. Thanks for attending. Announcements. We just met today, the planning committee meeting, and we've got a good portion of next year's programs already planned out, and they look really good and promising. So I'm the chair for Central Ohio. We're going to be Ohio pretty soon. And that's it for all of my announcements. And I'm going to introduce to you Donna Winters.
Well, hello, everybody. So good to see everybody, even though I'm not seeing everybody. But anyway, so the writers group, which we have a wonderful group and have a great deal of fun sharing what we do. We've been working a lot this year on writing our memoirs, chapters of our memoirs. And so we're calling this Sands Through the Hourglass Stories from the Days of Our Lives. So if any of you were soap opera fans, you know that that was taken from way back when, what I used to study too when I was in college. So one of the things that in the introduction that we wanted to do was just kind of talk a little bit about what exactly is a memoir. And, you know, obviously taken from the French word, it's from French and meaning memory. And so it's taking snippets really, or different events in our lives and writing about those and talking about those and how they've influenced us. And a lot of times I've often wondered, like, what's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography? And an autobiography, you're taking your life and just chronicling it basically from beginning to end, or when I say end, where you are at this point in time or the point in time that you wrote it. But in a memoir, it's more anecdotal. So we take these life-changing moments or chapters of our lives and document them. And how have they helped us transition from one stage or another? How did they influence us? Which I think is perfect for what it is, what we do with TTN anyway. So it kind of fits right in. And the one thing that intrigues me, and then we'll get started, is with the memoir, this whole idea of memory, because memory is so subjective. And oftentimes when I was writing this, I thought, now, did that really happen? Was that really the truth? And sometimes the truth of what we think it is something maybe totally different than what it was. And I'll give one real short example of that. For years and years and years, I always talked about this third grade teacher, Mrs. Ramaley. And I remember this thing so clearly. She was pregnant. And, you know, of course, this is back in the 50s when we were having air raid drills and all of that type of stuff. And she was pregnant. And somebody came into the room and flashed a photograph of her. And there was a flash. And she jumped and she said, "Oh my gosh, what was that?" And then when she realized it was somebody taking a picture, she said, "Oh, I thought it was maybe an atom blast. I didn't know what it was." And the weird thing about that is not too long ago, actually it was just this last year, I was looking through some pictures. Mrs. Ramaley was not my third grade teacher. I don't even know what grade. I was looking for a picture. I thought, now who in the hell was Mrs. Ramaley? I remember this so clearly that it was third grade. So when we're writing our memoirs, it really is kind of mining this depth of what we think our memories are, trying to find the reality in that and how they've informed us to the present. So we've had a lot of fun as a group writing these and listening to each other and sharing our experiences and all of that. So with that, I think we'll get started. And I guess I'm the one that's leading us off today. And so since mine's called In the Beginning, I guess it's appropriate to be in the beginning. So, so I'll read mine and then I'm going to introduce Susie, who will come after me. So my first chapter is chapter 1, and it's called In the Beginning. On July 15th, in the year of our Lord, 1950, at precisely 3:47 p.m., a child was born unto Sydney and Virginia in Cleveland, Ohio. News of the arrival had been eagerly anticipated by all. The birds were singing in the trees and the sun was shining brightly. Not a cloud was seen in the deep blue sky. Angels were singing on high. It was said that such a beautiful baby had never been seen. Her hair was black and her eyes were deep blue. Fresh from the womb, she was smiling and happy. It took a few seconds, but suddenly she belted out a perfectly pitched trill like a song from heaven, loud and exciting, announcing her arrival. The sound of her voice left everyone stunned into a trance-like silence. Virginia and Sid were beaming, certain that no other in the land had ever accomplished a feat of such magnitude. They named their child, a girl, Donna Marie. Praise be. The events leading up to the big day when the first rush of air filled my lungs to almost bursting are indelibly burned on the pages of my memory. Excuse me, you guys. I remember them as if it was yesterday, and the story as told by Virginia, my mother, couldn't be more different than mine. I found over the years that the world according to Virginia and the world according to Donna were like separate planets circling around the same sun. I was there. This is what happened. A few weeks before my momentous arrival, I started to prepare. I practiced breathing, working to get my lungs ready for my life on the outside. Don't think for a moment my time in the womb was spent in idle bliss. I had to practice and prepare constantly. Breathing was like getting ready for a marathon. I gained endurance and strength with each practice session, and my lungs became primed and ready. I knew the preparation was essential for the trip down the narrow canal to end in success, and I hoped that if I prepared well, the journey would be short and sweet. I noticed that I was becoming more and more aware of what was going on, both inside and outside my home in the womb. My head was full of thoughts. I was beginning to consciously plan my entrance in earnest. This whole journey was going to take some maneuvering, and I had to know exactly what I needed to do with perfect timing. My head began to swell with images and sounds. My brain was alive with electricity, sending signals and forming connections to every part of my body. I learned how to suck and swallow, and I practiced these things daily. There was one thing that concerned me. I was gaining weight. I wanted to make sure I could fit through the canal without getting stuck, which would certainly be a disaster. I was hungry all the time. It was like my body needed to be fat and I couldn't stop it. I was almost ready to go. I could sense it. I knew I could survive outside. I had to be strong and ready to help Virginia get her act together to help out. I was hoping she was up to the task, but I had my doubts based on my experience thus far. We had to prepare and work together, for I was about ready to transition from being a water-dwelling fish to an air-breathing Tellurian. I finally felt ready. My lungs were ready to suck in air. My mind was alert. I knew exactly where to go and how to get there. I had to develop my survival skills, and my body was prepared. The only thing to do now was let Virginia know it was time. Okay, Jenny, ready or not, here I come. I sent some signals to her to give her a heads up. My brain released substances that would get things rolling. I strongly felt the need to breathe air. I needed to fill my lungs and feel my chest expand. This space was getting claustrophobic, too small for my growing body. My legs were smashed into my chest and my arms had little space to move. I felt the need to unfold myself like a soaked sponge. I began to send out signals that would create disturbances in Ginny's body that it couldn't ignore, calling it into action. We had to be in total sync, and I was doing everything I could to get her ready. I could tell she was getting the message. The walls were starting to squeeze in on me as her body started to get ready to give birth. This was one of the few times she and I experienced perfect communion, and I sometimes feel sad about that, longing for days like this when there was effortless balance and union. That would be rare, as I'll share later. All systems looked like a go. The door to the outside world gradually began to open, and I started to turn toward it. I knew that going head first through the tunnel would be the best way to get out. I'd planned every movement, and it was now or never. As I got closer to the doorway to my future, I pushed against the barrier that blocked my way, and the plug released. All of the water that had surrounded me drained out. I was no longer floating. I was on my way to dry land, the road trip of a lifetime. I really need your help now, Virginia, I remember thinking. You've got to push to help me along because I can't do this alone. I was prepared for how it was going to hurt. I wasn't prepared, excuse me, for how it was going to hurt. My head felt like it was being squeezed and my face was being smashed. I could hardly think. Virginia was yelling, but I had to keep going. I had to breathe. I had to move my arms. They were pinned to my sides. Come on, Virginia, one more big push and we can both get this over with. You can do it. I'm counting on you. I need you now more than ever. Next thing I knew, I flew out and sailed through the air like a projectile. My arms stretched out like wings and I felt the air caress every part of my body. Someone caught me before I torpedoed across the room. Though I was exhilarated, I was completely unprepared for the shock. I hadn't planned for that. The room was ice cold, the lights glaring, and the sounds deafening. I screamed from the shock and my lungs filled with air. My arms and legs kicked and punched. I was free but disoriented. Part of me wanted to crawl back into the warm and safe space from which I came. Everyone leaped into action. The man who caught me, Dr. Wall, I later found out, untethered me from Virginia and then handed me to a woman with a pointy cap on her head. I never did find out her name, but I remember she was kind and welcoming. She cleaned out my nose and put some drops in my eyes and dried me off. I heard her counting each finger and toe as she touched them, making sure they were all there. She listened to the beat of my heart and checked all of my systems. All parts were present and in working order. Thankfully, she wrapped me in a warm, comforting blanket and I began to relax. I was cold, my head still hurt, and I was a little bruised. I heard Dr. Wall say I was very active and a wonderful baby. Then for some unknown reason, he congratulated Virginia and said, "Good job." I was shocked. Her part in this whole thing was next to nothing. A few lines in a 4-act play that took weeks to rehearse and perform. Not one word of congratulations to me was uttered. You'd think she'd orchestrated the entire thing. I decided to let her have her day in the sun, but this was portentous of things to come, as I would find out. For now, I had other things on my mind as I took everything in. The nurse with the pointed hat laid me in Virginia's arms. She said, "Hi, welcome home." That was when I started calling her mother instead of Virginia. I looked at her face. It was a big blur, but I could see she was pretty. For all her weariness, she looked happy and content. I didn't see Sid. On that day, I didn't see the sun shining. I didn't hear birds singing in the trees, and I didn't see a cloudless, deep blue sky. I didn't hear angels singing on high. For all I know, Virginia may have heard the angels singing that day, but the time and place of the momentous event was where the intersection of our stories ended. I was a stranger in a strange land, curious and scared at the same time, but most of all, excited and ready to record my chapters in the Book of Life. Book of Life, Chapter 2. The end. So I'd like to introduce Susie Collins, who is going to read her piece. So you're on, Susie.
Oh, such a beautiful beginning. Thanks, Donna. Okay, this is the hug. It wasn't my intention to solicit affection or to seduce this young guy into my bed when I asked him for a hug. My intention came from a feeling of connection and appreciation, and little did I know where that hug would lead. To my surprise, during this embrace, there was such a strong magnetic pull between us that felt like our molecules were mixing together and two bodies of flesh had become one. I felt like I'd been transported to a place called home. I know it might sound corny, but home, not as a place I lived in Chillicothe or even where I grew up in Portsmouth, but home as in the space where I could relax, body, mind, and spirit with another human being, a connection I'd never felt before. As I look back now, I realize that my request for that hug came from somewhere far beyond me and completely out of my control, a divine opening to possibilities I'd never seen up until then. This connection, this feeling of being home, made no sense intellectually because this guy, Otto, was 16 years younger than me And up until that moment, I had considered us acquaintances who had met at our monthly chiropractor's spiritual study group meetings. In fact, my first impression of him when he presented a program on his weight loss to the group was that he played loud music and was a bit irritatingly over the top enthusiastic. We hadn't even had a serious conversation before the evening when I asked him if he'd like to trade energy sessions with me. Because he was a Reiki practitioner and I practiced polarity therapy, both holistic healing modalities, not well known to most people, I thought it would be fun to have that bodywork exchange experience. To say that I got more than I bargained for is an understatement, because during that hug and the feeling that both of us felt, I knew he was in my life to stay. Even though we both had to get up in a few hours to go to our respective jobs, we couldn't seem to break away from each other and that unique feeling. My simple request had us staying in this blissful feeling for hours. And yet, no matter how wonderful that magnetic feeling of being home was, we finally woke up into the reality of our situation and mutually decided that since it was 2 a.m., we needed to get some sleep because we both had to drive to work in a few hours. I remember watching him walk down the sidewalk toward his car to make the 20-minute drive to his apartment, thinking the absurd thought, wait a minute, he shouldn't be going. He belongs here. I kid you not. At that moment, he just turned around to look at me with the same thought reflecting in his eyes. Later, we dubbed that evening as our soulmate experience, with the curtains parting, the angels singing, and the whole world aglow because we had finally come together. Whether the whole soulmate thing is real or not, we don't really know. What we do know and what is real is how our coming together was no accident, and we've been together ever since. So where did that thought that he belonged with me come from? Was it wishful thinking, or did I glimpse the future? Now that might be a great story if it ended there in happily ever after, but with any relationship, soulmates or not, there comes a time when challenges and doubts smack you in the face. As our relationship deepened, fears began to surface, and I began worrying about our age difference. I wondered how I was ever going to be attractive to him when I'm in my 80s and a wrinkled, saggy mess, with him in his 60s and still a relatively young man. As I made up this scary future life with him in my head of him finding me repulsive, I found myself wanting to pull away from this mysterious, powerful love that was growing between us. But when we came together in our relationship, we made the commitment to not run away, as we had done in various ways in our previous marriages. So we were open and honest with each other about our fears. He had fears as well, not the same ones I did, but that he would lose me to death before him. Somehow we came to the conclusion that we really didn't know how long we had with each other. No one could know that, and to just cherish and enjoy the present moment without imagining a fearful future. This understanding that this moment in front of us is all we have has served us many times during our 24 years together. In addition to those fears brought on by our age difference, we found ourselves lapsing into old habits from our previous marriages that started to interfere with this beautiful connection we'd made. I saw myself taking him for granted and somehow holding him to a higher standard than I did my best girlfriend, not letting him off the hook if he disappointed me in any way. I saw myself not making clear requests, but rather making statements and thinking he should just know what I mean. I also saw myself trying to fix his low emotional states and suggesting that I had the answers for him if he just did what I said. But we were able to work through these obstacles and so much more because of our willingness to stay open, learn, grow, and always come back to love. Our love continues to be alive and vibrant after all this time. And one of the reasons is summed up by these words in a greeting card Otto sent me early in our relationship. Their love was big and fat because they fed it a lot between meals. We've continued to learn easier and more loving ways to communicate and be with one another as the years have gone by. We continue to feed our relationship with love moment by moment. And when we don't, there's always the opportunity to start over in the next moment, especially with a hug. Thank you. And now I'm going to play a video of Alison. And let's see, I will find it because she was not able to be here tonight.
It's in the bottom center, Susie. To play
Oh,
on.
sorry. Thank you.
Blindsided. I was so proud and excited the day I learned that my daughter Ashley had been offered a position with Verb Ballet in Cleveland. Not only would this opportunity rescue her from the one-year hell she had endured living and dancing in Oklahoma City as a part of the toxic environment at Oklahoma City Ballet, but she would be moving only 2 hours away from us. This was the closest she had ever lived since leaving home at the age of 17. We would actually be able to see her perform and visit her more frequently. I could not believe our good fortune. Little did I know how life would unfold. When she shared the news with my best friend, Mary, who resides in Westlake, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland, Mary immediately insisted that Ashley should live with her family. This sounded like an amazing opportunity. She would be living in a safe place with people who cared about her and at minimal expense, as she was not being charged rent. As an added bonus, when Rob and I visited with Ashley, we could stay there as well and visit with everyone together. Their son, Grant, is my godson, and because of the distance and age difference in our children, I had not spent much time actively participating in his life over the years. He was already 8 years old, and the chance to be more a part of his life through our visits certainly appealed to me. What I quickly came to realize is the true price of this situation. Mary was incredibly generous with Ashley, incorporating her into every aspect of their lives and lavishing Ashley with shopping excursions and lots of material items. Ashley had not been raised this way, so I am sure this was very enticing. As a result, Ashley, who is extremely deferential and obliges everything Mary wants or requires, as Mary hijacks Ashley's time, filling it with her demands. Ashley never tells her no or asserts any boundaries, making sure to placate each of Mary's expectations. To witness my young adult 22-year-old daughter, who has been given complete independence, trust, and freedom by her own parents for so many years, being treated like a child has been heart-wrenching. Adding insult to injury, it has dramatically changed my relationship with my daughter, a relationship which I have always cherished more than anything in this world. I felt like the luckiest mom alive all of the years I was raising Ashley. She is a wonderful daughter, and we have had so much fun together. I've been there for everything she has needed, listened to all of her hopes, dreams, worries, and challenges, and loved every moment of her life journey and the amazing memories it has created for us. Now I feel like I am having a relationship with the shell of a person. There is the obligatory phone call, which comes most days of the week, to report about her day and ask about mine. However, it is devoid of any emotion or connection and just another to-do to check off her list. On a rare occasion, there could be a moment of laughter, but nothing like the many years of conversation when I couldn't wait to hear from her and be invited into her world each day. When we visit, we barely see Ashley, and it is not my daughter who shows up. It is this beautiful girl who looks like my daughter, doling out small bits of time under duress, and someone who would rather be a million miles away. I have frequently begged Ashley to let me come visit her alone or with she and her boyfriend and stay in a hotel or just come for the day to have some genuine opportunity to enjoy time with her. Her answer is always the same. I can't do that. You have to stay at Mary's. If Mary finds out, she will never forgive me, and I owe it to her not to lie. What about me? This scenario is what I imagine a mother whose husband divorces her, remarries, and the new stepmom hijacks the kids feels like. Why do I come in last? Was I never a priority and she was just pretending because she didn't have a better option? It is hard to process how in an instant 22 years doesn't matter. I fully expected that my daughter would grow up and be less dependent upon me. That is the natural course of events. And I felt prepared having let her spread her wings so young. I knew she would meet a partner who would be the person on which she would eventually rely. And hopefully it would be someone who is family oriented and supportive of her remaining connected to her family. Ashley choosing a replacement parent was something I couldn't have foreseen. I feel very perplexed about how to continue a relationship with my daughter, since there really is nothing to continue. I love her and will be there in an instant for anything she needs, but I have no way to define where we are now. All I know to do for the moment is savor the time I have had and hope that she will want to reestablish a deeper connection at some point in the future. I will wait forever, whatever that may mean. I am eternally grateful that she is my daughter, and for a long time, I was given the privilege of being her mother. As I share this piece with you, I am grateful to report that some progress has been made. Ashley recently moved in with her boyfriend and is becoming more comfortable with having us stay in her home to maximize our time together. While this is definitely a time of evolution in the future of our relationship, I am deeply grateful for any time I can steal back from the last 2 years of our lives. Thank you.
And now I want to introduce Donna Kayne.
Hi, Chapter 3, Shattered Glass. When I was about 10 years old, Dad decided to divorce Mom because he believed that she was cheating on him. For most of my adult life, I didn't know whether to believe him. But in 2020, when I was 65 years old and Dad had been gone 10 years, I concluded that she was faithful and that he had to have been delusional and was probably even paranoid schizophrenic. This dilemma as to whether to believe that mom cheated on dad troubled me throughout my life, as I tried to discern what was truth and what was not. As a young adult, I was told that early in their marriage, when dad was about 19, doctors conducted a psychiatric evaluation and diagnosed him as being paranoid schizophrenic, or what is now called schizophrenia with paranoia. If the doctors were correct in diagnosing dad with this mental illness, it made sense that his delusions manifested as believing our mom was cheating on him with another man. The idea that dad might be paranoid schizophrenic became a bone of contention throughout his life as well, because he would say to me as an adult, "If you believe your mom didn't cheat on me, then you think I'm crazy. So which is it? Do you believe she cheated on me, or do you think I'm crazy?" In order to stay in dad's good graces and to avoid being disowned by him, I had to say that I believed that she cheated on him, even if I didn't. To help understand schizophrenia with paranoia, I quote from the following WebMD website, which reads in part as follows. Schizophrenia is a kind of psychosis, which means your mind doesn't agree with reality. Delusions are fixed beliefs that seem real to you, even when there's strong evidence they aren't. Paranoid delusions reflect profound fear and anxiety, along with the loss of the ability to tell what's real and what's not real. They might make you feel like your spouse or partner is cheating on you. People with schizophrenia aren't usually violent, but sometimes paranoid delusions can make them feel threatened and angry, and their actions usually focus on family members, and it happens at home. And that is just what happened. Dad felt threatened and became angry and violent with his family at home. It happened one day when I stayed home from elementary school at the age of 10. I was in the first floor half bath, just down the hall from the kitchen. Dad had moved out months before because my parents were getting divorced. However, I heard him come in and start yelling at mom in an angry, crazy voice. "You're dragging my name through the mud. Stop telling lies about me. Admit that you cheated on me." She refused, maybe because she didn't do it, or maybe because she knew if she did, he'd have the goods on her forever, whether she did it or not. The next thing I knew, mom was calling out for me. "Donna, help me! Donna, help!" Dad declared sternly and loudly, "Donna can't help you now. She's at school. She's not here to save you this time." And then I opened the bathroom door and stepped into the hallway. My senses were being assaulted, and my mind was struggling to interpret what I was witnessing. I saw Dad grasping mom's arms tightly with both hands. I heard mom let out a scream as Dad pushed her through the kitchen window. I heard the sharp, shrill cracking of glass breaking. I saw blood flowing from where each of the large glass shards stuck awkwardly out of the flesh on her arm. Pieces of glass tinged with blood flying from the window onto the floor. The wall phone being knocked off its perch, and an irritating tone began blaring from it. Dad saw me and stopped dead in his tracks as he realized I really was there. He backed off and gave mom one last verbal threat. "Stop dragging my name through the mud." I heard something like his attorney would be in touch, and just like that, he was gone. Mom and I were crying and shaking as we held each other for comfort. Dad had become this violent, scary, crazy person, physically hurting mom, calling her names, accusing her of cheating and threatening to hurt her again if she kept telling lies about him. Jump ahead to 1991 when I was in my 40s. I sprained both wrists when I was rear-ended in a car accident because I was holding on to the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The car accident put into motion a chain of events that changed my life forever. Because of the pain in my wrists, I could no longer pick up scuba tanks. Consequently, I had to relinquish my newly earned position as a professional scuba dive master. As a dive master, I demonstrated underwater skills and worked with students to help them overcome their fear of taking their masks off underwater, putting their masks back on, and then clearing them of water. Because I couldn't scuba dive, let alone dive master, I became very depressed. It got so bad that I sought out the help of my primary care physician, Dr. Howard Rowan, and he referred me to Dr. Sharon Moorhead, a clinical psychologist. I started undergoing psychotherapy, and we started looking into my past. We talked about some of Dad's behavior and his conviction that Mom cheated on him. I began to believe that Mom was telling the truth and that the lies Dad accused her of were just her side of the story, but so very true. So in reasoning this out, I figured if Mom had been telling the truth, that meant Dad was not seeing it for what it was. And he really was delusional and maybe even had schizophrenia with paranoia. However, if I wanted to have a father, I had to keep these thoughts to myself. In fact, sometimes I couldn't even admit it to myself. Dad was not delusional. He was not crazy. And he most certainly was not paranoid schizophrenic. How could he be? After all, he was remarkably successful in business and had amassed a fair amount of wealth that enabled him to retire and build a $1 million housing compound in the mountains of Kanchanaburi province of Thailand. My brain was grappling with all of this from the moment Dad threw Mom through the window in a blind rage in 1965 until his death at 81 in 2010, and beyond the grave. The crazy man I saw him as during those moments was a common theme and the source of night terrors for years to come. Today, honestly, I still have trouble believing that Dad really was paranoid schizophrenic. But if I focus on his behavior, it leads me to that very diagnosis, no matter which way I look at it. And I'm trying to be at peace with it, but it's easier said than done. The night terrors stopped many years ago. I'm still seeing a social worker, and we're still working on this and other related themes. Maybe now that I admit that Dad may have been mentally ill, I can continue my journey to heal myself. Can I cry now? No. I would like to introduce Mary Greenlee.
Thank you. What are the chances after 50 years is what I'm going to be talking about. July 5th, early morning, my house phone rang and I reached over to the phone that was sitting on my Victorian washstand beside my bed. And I saw the name Suzanne Kincaid was calling, and so I answered, "Good morning." Suzanne spoke hurriedly. "David is in the emergency room at Riverside. I need to get to work, and would you be there to help him?" Well, being with my son at Riverside's ER is not a new experience for me. The first run I made was in 1971 when my 4-year-old had his forehead He
Mary.
accidentally dove into the olive barrel that, yes,
Yeah, turn your video off. So we-
I'm having, yeah, I did, it's off. Can you hear me? Thank you. The first run I had made in 1971 was when my 4-year-old had split his forehead open. He accidentally dove into an olive barrel, which was the base for a game table. I can recount a multiple year list of times I had either joined David in the ER or I had taken him from the athletic field or the swimming pool. I can attest that in the 50 years I have made such journeys, the ER at Riverside has changed dramatically. From an 8-bar. It's far busier now than it was in the 1970s. However, the growth of Riverside Hospital is not my subject today. In time, it's about a surprise 3-generational meetup in the ER. I did respond quickly to David's fiancée, Suzanne, that I would get myself dressed and be on my way to assist them. Parking in the big red garage was recommended, and it was then that I thought about my first trip in 1971. There was a small lot provided for ER parking right next to the ER. Parking in the red garage required walking through a long hallway that brought me through sliding doors that led me. I was met by a door lady who had to take my temperature and instruct me how to put on my new clean mask to prevent the spread of COVID-19. At that time, I had no idea that I would become an expert at putting on the highest level masks and gowns that were required when David was admitted into Riverside's COVID unit. In the ER, only one person is allowed to be bedside with the patient. Upon arrival, I texted Suzanne to come out to the lobby, and so we switched positions and I became the one person allowed in the ER. This exchange of positions brought significant reordering to my agenda for the next 10 days. To arrive at David's bedside, I had navigated several long hallways, taken multiple turns, and interpreted many directional signs. I found my son David in ER room 41. He was in serious breathing trouble as he was lying flat on one of the rolling hospital gurneys. It was not long until I heard an attendant tell us that he was COVID-19 positive. A portable X-ray had revealed serious lung problems. I knew that he had elected not to receive the vaccine after considerable research. I had chosen to pursue the vaccination even though I was at elevated risk of complications from the vaccine. So it was that I became the test bunny for the effectiveness of Pfizer's 2-shot vaccine. Cell phone registration was extremely poor in David's room. I excused myself and went into the hall to find a window or an entrance where I could experience improved cell reception. I wanted to make the call to my daughter to get some advice. When I started down the hall, I walked by the room next door. The door was closed. The door had a window for looking inside and outside. As I walked past that door, I suddenly heard a recognizable voice saying, "Mary." I turned around and quickly recognized that my ex-daughter-in-law, Tiffany, was standing in the hallway. "Peyton is here, and she has COVID-19. What are you doing here?" What are the chances that a father and a daughter would be next to each other in an ER, both testing positive to COVID-19? They had no idea they were both in the ER. Peyton does not live with her dad. Peyton had tried to call him earlier that morning when she was leaving for the ER. She was not able to connect with him then, and nor could she connect with him in the ER because of the poor cell connectivity. Okay, turning around immediately, I entered Peyton's room. I did not think about the rules. Peyton was feverish and feeling terrible. I told Peyton about her dad's condition. I questioned about the last time they had been together. That time was at Riverside 10 days earlier when David was in the hospital for 5 days with a neck and shoulder injury he had sustained at the work. Tiffany explained that Peyton was being sent home. I relayed that David was diagnosed with COVID viral pneumonia and he would be admitted to the COVID unit. Immediately, I sensed Peyton was scared about losing her dad. I pledged that I would open the door when she was departing for home so she could see her dad. Shortly thereafter, I returned to David's bedside to the room next door. While keeping my eyes on the window of the door in the hallway, I told my son about his daughter's presence in the room next door. He was visibly frightened. David was sicker than I had ever seen him in 54 years. I prepared him for my plan to open the door so he could see his departing beloved daughter. We spent the waiting time reviewing the last time the two of them were together. Their visit was at Riverside in the Yellow Hospital when Peyton came to visit her dad while he was being treated for the neck injury. Well, like Peyton, David had started thinking about when they could have caught the virus together. Could it have been in the Yellow Hospital where they might have been exposed to COVID-19? A gentle knock on the door signaled Peyton was in the hallway. I pulled back the curtains surrounding the bed so their eyes could meet. They met and the tears flowed. Peyton was not going to be stopped from reaching him as she bounded into the room. She engulfed her dad with her loving arms. A few words were exchanged that I did not hear. Tiffany stood in the hall watching it all and not believing this meeting could really be happening. Father and daughter parted after clenching their hands together. Would this be the last time their eyes would ever meet? David's door was closed again, without any staff members observing or redirecting the movements of both the patients and the visitor. Later that morning, David and I were escorted to the Blue Hospital and to the 4th floor COVID unit. We were told promptly this room would be temporary because the COVID unit was closing down because there were not enough people there. The next morning did bring a move to the Green Hospital, where the rooms were temporary and not well suited for critical care patients. There would be a move 3 days later to the Orange Hospital, where accommodations now included the necessary high level of oxygen needed for David's treatment of severe pneumonia. During all of David's stay, I was the only visitor permitted. He indeed needed a strong advocate for multiple reasons, which are a substance of another COVID story. What are the chances that my son would be placed in ER next to his daughter without knowing she was even there? Had it not been for my walk to locate better cell service, they might never have been able to embrace that scary moment. What are the chances that I would be the mother on duty at Riverside's ER for her son for over 50 years? And now I want to introduce Jeannette McDonald, Lady in Red.
Oh, there you go. Oh, Mary, you made me cry.
Okay, maybe all of you remember this commercial. It was back in the 70s, and it went like this. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man, 'cause I'm a woman, WOMAN. Remember that one? I was in my 30s when the women's movement came alive in my life, and it was a new concept to me. Women were equal to men. Can you imagine that? I had never given it serious thought, but I kept hearing it on the news and reading articles that said men were supposed to help around the house and help with the children. Men and women were partners in this marriage thing. Yes, men should be able to change diapers and should also help raise the children. Wow, could this be true? I was a military wife, and my husband and I lived in Alaska with our 2 children when this thing called Women's Lib started. I did not burn my bra, but my women friends and I made a statement by throwing our bras around the house, hanging them on the couch and on the lampshades. Yes, we were going to be there for all women, and we wanted to be equal to men. While we were planning and thinking about how to be liberated women, our husbands were out drinking and most likely playing around with less liberated women. We would drive around town trying to find the bar they were hanging out, taking our children with us, looking like anything but liberated women. At this time, I had been married for about 10 years and had been playing the role that society had given me of the poor, sweet, suffering wife. But the news is out. I am equal to my husband, and I had certain rights that I didn't know I had, and it was time for me to change my role. This would not be easy. It sounded good, but little did I know how much this would change me and society as a whole. The first part of my marriage was like Father Knows Best. But then it was in the news and in books. And it was no longer Father Knows Best anymore, but it was also Mom also knows best. Have you ever tried to change anything that has been set in stone for so many years? For 10 years, I was a sweet, obeying wife who knows her place, was cleaning the home and taking care of the children. Why hadn't I known before that I was equal and had rights? My mom, failed to tell me how important I was. I did not have a clue. When I was growing up, my goal in life was to get married, have children, and make my husband happy. No one told me I was also supposed to be happy. This was brand new ground that had never been tread, and men and women had no models to follow. This was not the path our parents had taken. We had to blaze a new trail together, but the truth of the matter is that men and women started to go on separate paths. And 40 years later, we are still trying to unite. During these changing times, men and women were grappling to find out who they really were. I remember one time taking a stand. I was not going to take the garbage out anymore. I wanted my husband to help me more around the house. He refused. We were living in Hawaii, so the climate was not right for garbage to be standing for days. After the magnets started crawling on the kitchen floor, I finally relented and took the garbage out. As time passed, men and women started to make changes to their family life. If men were to help around the house and with the children, then women needed to contribute more to the financial part of the marriage. Women were no longer staying home with their children like their mothers did before them. I was one of those women who sought employment. I had fond memories of my mother working for a short time when I was small and how unhappy she was when my father made her quit because her job was to take care of the home and the children. I started working in a child care center because taking care of children was the only skill I had. Now I was contributing with the finances, but I had a rude awakening. When I went out in the workforce, I still had to care for the children and keep the house clean. For men and women to change roles in their married life, midstream or their marriage is almost impossible. The result of these changes were that men and women felt lost and weren't sure what their roles in life were supposed to be. They were lost to each other, and 50% of marriages failed. It happened so many years ago. In fact, it was 40 years ago that I took off my bra and declared my independence with my other women friends. I often wonder what happened to those women in Alaska. My life was
Jeanette, we lost you. You're frozen. Maybe you could turn your video off and pick up where you left off. Okay, your photo is gone. Can you try talking? I can't hear you yet. She must have left and is gonna come back. So I'll watch for her to let her back in. Hmm. I don't see her yet.
You want me to call her, Donna?
Yeah. She's probably trying.
We could go on to Mary Wrench and then
Ye-
pick Jeannette back up.
Yeah, Marianne, are you able to start? You'll have to unmute yourself. There we go. Okay, we can hear you.
No, you're,
What?
She muted herself.
Muted again.
Marianne, you muted yourself again.
there you
There she
go.
goes.
Am I okay now?
You're okay
Yeah.
now. Mhm.
Oh, okay. I'm reading it backwards. Well, today we're going to postpone Kismet for a little bit and instead go to an earlier time, and I'm going to read to you Daddy's Girl. I was definitely a daddy's girl. The affection was both ways. My dad used to tell me that when I was a newborn, he frequented the nursery observation window multiple times during my mother and my hospital stay. Once a nurse stopped her on her way to returning a crying a little bundle to the nursery. She looked at my daddy and said, my, you certainly are a proud grandpa. My dad said rather defensively, I'm not her grandpa, I'm her father. He was a bald-headed 50-year-old man, so I could understand the mistake. As a small child, I was happiest in my daddy's arms. When I was sick, I couldn't sleep unless my little hand gripped his thumb firmly. I remember having the measles when I was about 4 years old. My parents had twin beds in their room, and I insisted on sleeping in one of them, beds pushed together, with me gripping my daddy's thumb for dear life. I think he loved it too. When I was still small, I used to sit on the curb at the end of our street and wait for my daddy to drive home from work. He would beep his car horn in a special beepity beep beep way about a half a block away to let me know he was coming. He would stop in front of me and I'd hop into the front seat beside him and ride the short way to our garage, bouncing in the seat with excitement. When he stopped, he gave me a big hug and covered my little face with kisses. This was a ritual of ours that lasted until I was about 6 years old. I can still feel how my little heart would jump in my chest at the sound of the car horn. If I were playing in front of our house, I heard him and heard his beepity beep beep, I would run like crazy to get to the corner where he stopped to pick me up. My daddy became a wholesale office supply salesman with a territory in 5 upper Midwest states, and he was often on the road away from home for more than a week at a time. I used to miss him a lot. When I was about 7 years old, I made my first trip with him to Wisconsin. I was so thrilled I could hardly contain myself. I remember eating in the hotel dining room with him and feeling so grown up. When he was off to work, I would befriend the elevator man who let me drive the elevator. He was a lovely grandfatherly man who had worked with the hotel for many years. He had a good deal of patience with this persuasive, determined little girl. I quickly learned how to stop the elevator right at the floor level so the passengers wouldn't trip when stepping out of to their floor. It was much more fun than just pushing an elevator button. In the summer going into the 4th grade, I still did not know my times tables. I never was big at math. I would rather read. My mother lost patience with me and prevailed upon Daddy to teach me my times tables, and that he did with much enthusiasm as he drove the boring miles of road lined with corn stalks and pastures through Iowa and Wisconsin. Between doing the alphabet on the road signs along the highway and looking out for Brill Cream rhyme signs, he would drill me on my times tables, 3 times 6, 7 times 9, 4 times 12, and on for miles. By the end of the summer and several trips, I was fluent through the times tables 12. He made it a game rather than a chore, and I got an A in the 4th grade math. Those were wonderful years for me. We would sing old-fashioned songs like Down by the Old Mill Stream and Let Me Call You Sweetheart at the top of our lungs, with the windows open and the wind blowing in our faces. We also counted specific kinds of cows in the field. I used to know what they were, Guernsey and some other kinds I've long forgotten. Sometimes I would just fall asleep snuggling close to my daddy with his arm around me, without seatbelts. This was the last summer of my travels with my daddy and of being an only child. Shortly after, my baby brother was born. That's it. Oh, I have somebody to introduce. Roberta.
Maybe we want to finish up Jeannette and then have Roberta.
Oh, good. We can do that. Good. She's back. Good.
So sorry. I was just at the end. I was like, oh, wow.
I know. You were up to the grand finale. Okay.
I know.
You left off where you wondered what happened to the women in Alaska.
Well, I think I said, okay, my life was changed, but it took years before I reached my independence. When I became a work, did I read that? But this is almost the end. But when I became a working mother and wife, I realized I had no skills and that my salary was too small. Now I know I read all that. How can you be a liberated woman, have a good paying job?
Jeannette,
How do you
You didn't
Jeannette,
read that,
don't
Jeannette.
skim over that because you dropped off well before, you froze up well before you got to that part.
Oh, okay. Well, then I can read it.
Yeah.
My life was changed, but it took years before I reached my independence. When I became a working mother and wife, I realized I had no skills and that my salary was too small. I decided to go back to school and get my degree. My marriage could not take the stress of all these things and changes. If I was supposed to be a liberated woman, wouldn't I have to obtain a good paying job? How do you work, go to school, be a good mother, and keep your relationship intact with your husband? I know there were so many men and women who have their own stories to tell about the women's movement. In any moment in history, people seem to lose their balance. That is why I laughed every time I saw this commercial on TV, because I thought it was so ridiculous and also sad, because it made women think they could do it all. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never forget you're a man, 'cause I'm a woman, WOMAN. That's it.
There we are. That was good.
Okay.
Okay. And now I'll introduce Roberta.
Yeah. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Roberta. I think you all know me. It looks like our visitor from the other chapter left. Okay, I'm going to read an introduction to my memoir, or what I might write about in my memoir. I often have a hard time. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Nod your head. Okay. Oh, and Marianne, can you mute? And I think everyone else is muted. Okay. I often have a hard time writing, especially every day. Maybe because no one will ever take the time to read it. Maybe because it's therapeutic and healing and it makes me cry. Maybe because it's hard or doesn't take my mind off the craziness of my life or the insanity of this world. My promise to myself is to write my intention for the day and my gratitude for a few things. It's something to aspire to, and I accomplish it for a few days in a row and then lapse for a week or so. And my commitment to the writers group is to write a chapter in my memoir. Shall I write about my childhood that I can't remember? My teen years that I barely remember? My marriages that I somewhat remember? There's my first husband, Bob, who I was married to for only 1 year. And my affair with David while I was married to Bob, which led to a divorce and another disastrous marriage of 3 years. Or my non-marriage to my next relationship person, Eric, who I stayed with for 4 years. I could write about my hippie years, what little I remember of them, living with Eric in his big old home where there were drugs, sex, and guns, and other men that I slept with. I could write about the one small, wonderful thing during those 4 years, which was my trip to Europe in 1976 on a tour bus with another girl who was a friend acquaintance. Not sure that's a chapter, but I do have a photo book of that trip to 7 countries. Or I could write about my days of going dancing to disco music, where I met Gary, my third husband, the one I loved with all my heart and soul and stayed with for 11 years. I stayed until my soul said I had more lessons to learn and I needed to move out and move on. It's hard for me to believe that I left someone so kind and loving and beautiful inside, who supported me through the toughest years of my life, who was there for me through my battles with agoraphobia and cancer. But my soul, my very being said, you have to go. There is definitely a chapter which has already been written on my agoraphobia and overcoming it. I could write a chapter on my move to Houston to work with and for my dad. A part of that chapter might be the insanity of country western dancing and fun with lots of men. And the next chapter would be about my 10-year relationship with Adam, how we met at work at my father's company, how we left Houston to move to Austin and then moved back to Houston, how I helped him start and run his plumbing business, my struggles with his son and helping to raise his son who lived with us for a while, my battles internal and external with Adam's alcoholism, and my growth and breaking free and the life-changing end to that relationship. The next chapter could be about my relationship with Martin. Again, how we met, our move to Columbus from Houston, my deep love for him, our 10 years together, my battles inside and out with his anger issues and his alcoholism, and the final straw that led me to leave him. There would be a chapter on my love of photography, how I started, how I wanted to do it for a living, how healing it is for me, and how it became a true love and passion of mine. And the final chapter could be about the last 8 years since I left Martin, being on my own for many years and for one of the first times in my life, and the freedom and peace I have found in being alone, traveling, taking pictures, and the companionship of my faithful fur baby, Hannah. I've always wanted to write a memoir about my life. Yet after researching the possibilities of these chapters by going back to my old journals, I found that some of these memories are too painful to research and write about. And it brought home to me again that I was a very, very different person in the past, someone I don't recognize now. But on the other hand, I've gained so much wisdom from looking back and seeing how far I've come, how much I've learned, and how these experiences helped shape the current me and made me the wise woman I am today. So I may or may not continue writing my memoir, but I have been blessed and called upon by my angels to write the introduction and share it with you. The end. Thank you. Sorry, and I'm introducing Mary Hiland, who is going to end our readings with a joyful New Year's Day. Mary, take it away.
Okay, I keep getting a message that my internet connection is weak, so I hope I can make it through my story. It's called New.
Mary, if
We
you
can-
turn off your video, you might save some bandwidth.
Okay.
That might help.
Good. We could see our breaths in little air as we climb and feeling that little catch in our throats. Right ready for unwarmed air. In our boots in the been cleared, but out here in the Hocking Hills, the snow lay except for the little animal tracks. The sky was a solid gray, but in the east, there was the promise of a winter sun creeping into the icy air and painting the barren branches with glittering icicles would eventually melt almost to touching the ground by the end of the afternoon. And more happy hikers would emerge, blowing out their own little puffs of frozen air from called out joyful greetings to other winter lovers who had forsaken their warm and comfy couch. I opened the back door and my seeing eye dog, Sherry, bounded out with glee. She snorted and sniffed the air, sniffed the excitement that was hers today. It was New Year's Day and we were with a 7-mile hike and a picnic in the meadow. Perfect for the 1st of January. The clock arrived and it appeared we all were there. We began our trek down the snowy path, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, with Sherry in the lead, of course. Guide dogs always like to be first. We stepped over snowy roots and icy rocks, climbed over fallen tree trunks, brittle with snow. We stopped to listen to a groaning tree as it swayed slightly in the breeze, and the cry of a crow as it split the sky. Now we were warming up, pausing to take frozen or to munch on a granola bar, kept chewable in a warm inside pocket. The path wandered uphill and down and occasionally along a creek. We struggled to keep off our knees going up and just slid on our butts going down the descents. A recent away a bridge over, but a good-sized log had been thoughtfully placed there as a bridge. Other hikers stepped up on and inched along to the other side, but Sherry and I held back. Not going to work for a blind hiker and her dog, not without help. But one of the guys came to our rescue. He scooped Sherry up in his arms, threw her over his shoulder, and walked, followed his backpack, embarrassed to be carried. But I was afraid of getting frostbitten in the half-frozen creek. And as dogs do when they think a joke has been played on them, she jumped around and acted like this was the most fun of all. Most fun was yet to come. By lunchtime, we had come to a clearing for our picnic lunch. Most of us had brought but one well-equipped a camp stove and offered everyone hot soup or hot chocolate. Life seemed pretty perfect, sitting in the winter sun, sipping with new friends. A stand of trees stood about 50 yards away, and except for nothing else around us. So I unhooked Sherry's harness, and she was off like a shot into the woods, free at last to do a little exploration of her own and maybe have a pit stop while nobody was looking. In a few minutes, just as I was beginning to worry, she came racing back to me. She might as well have said, "This was the best time I have ever had." But she was ready for our trek back along the path. The sun had warmed the snow just a little, enough so that Sherry's paws penetrated the top layer. So the snow stuck to the hair between her toes, making little hard snowballs that might have looked cute on a dog toy, but for a real dog were painful and made it hard to walk. Seeing her limping, my friend and I stopped to dig out those little icy balls of snow. And again, she was back to her joyful self. Back at the cars, we all sang out, "Happy New Year!" We kicked off the snow off our boots, climbed in the cars, and sighed with the pleasure of one of the happiest New Year's days ever, even for Sherry, who was sound asleep in minutes. And that's the end of my story and the end of all of our stories for this evening, but the program is not quite over. Here's Susie.
Oh, Mary, that was beautiful, as usual. Okay, now it's your turn. We're going to let you write we're going to take 5 minutes and ask you to write, "I remember when." Just some memory. You can even make it up. Who cares? I remember when. Okay, I'll start the timer. Okay. Now it's your turn to read. Who would like to read their I Remember When? Sharon. You need to unmute.
I remember when it was my turn to take my place in that esteemed organization, the Ice Cream Soda Club. Grace M. McSherry, my fourth grade teacher, younger and prettier than any of the teachers I'd had thus far, had devised this ingenious plan whereby 4 children heard their names called out each Wednesday as the week's honored group that would join her for ice cream sodas at Coon's Ice Cream Shop on Fordham Road, right around the corner from school. Of course, the genius of Miss McSherry's plan was that every child, by the end of the term, had been so honored, supposedly for their extraordinary achievement that particular week, but in actuality, just for being themselves. Miss McSherry and the 4 lucky guests practically floated into the ice cream shop on a cloud. I remembered that I ordered a black and white ice cream soda. And that's as far as I got.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Maureen. You have to unmute.
I remember when chickens lived in the neighborhood. I was 5 and my friend Mary was 7 back in those days. And we were allowed then to walk to the store for popsicles on good days. But it meant we had to stay on the sidewalk. And the sidewalk took us in front of Annie Coyne's house. Now, Annie was a lovely woman who must have been, I think, probably my age at the time, but she seemed ancient. Her house was old, and the yard was bordered by a hedge that was taller than we were. And when we got to her house, to her yard, we were very quiet and crept along till we got to the edge of the driveway where we had to stop and carefully look to see what might be coming. And no matter how clear it seemed, no matter how empty the yard was, when we stepped out from behind the hedge, the chickens attacked, cackling and cawing, and we screamed right along with them because those things pecked at our knees. Mary was short. Mary and I were the same, even though we were 2 years apart, we were the same size back in those days. So our knees were right there, equally pecked. So we ran and got to the other side of the drive safely on our way to get the popsicles. We made that trip whenever we could because getting a popsicle on a hot summer day was always worth the risk of the chicken pecking.
Thank you. Who's next?
And I hate chickens to this day. I do not like. In fact, my neighbors behind us now have chickens. It's a thing now in the suburbs. People have chickens, and I hear them every morning. And I just am glad that they're in their fenced yard and I don't have to go anywhere near them. So.
Thanks, Maureen. Okay, who's next? We can take a few more here. Oh, Pat, good.
I remember when my grandmother, well into her 60s, declared to me and my girlfriends that when she was a girl, she not only rode her bicycle, she rode it with her feet propped up on the handlebars. Dare you, someone said, to my grandma's delight. It was just the invitation she'd been waiting for probably from the moment my mother insisted she come live with us because she had a bad heart. To my mother's horror, Grandma grabbed my bicycle and walked it to the top of the neighborhood hill. In a flash, she descended, white hair usually in a bun, but now straight out behind her. We gasped. Mama scolded. We never dared Grandma again.
Thanks, Pat. Carol.
Okay, I remember when I was about 3 years old. I have a vivid memory of a trip my family took to Washington, D.C. to visit my dad's two sisters, one divorced, the other never married, and his mother, all who lived together. They say you really don't remember things from that age. It was only the picture you saw and you thought you remembered. But it was my senses that were engaged that provided this memory. I remember eating the raspberries from my grandmother's bushes in the backyard, an amazing flavor that I had never experienced before, and urging my dad to go faster when we were on a hilly roller coaster-like road, much to my mother's chagrin. But the thing that makes me certain I can remember that trip was the journey home. We stopped to stay in a motel. When we went to our room, the door opened and it was freezing cold. I had never experienced air conditioning, and there it was.
Thank you, Carol. And we have time for whoever else would like to read theirs. Anybody else? Okay, you all have the beginnings of your memoirs, and we want to hear more at some time. Thank you all.
Does anybody have any comments about any of the writings? Nope. Okay.
Yeah.
I just love the authenticity of the writing, these wonderful real stories. I felt like you were really courageous to share a part of yourselves. And that's what makes writing so engaging. So thank you.
I felt like it was like a shortcut to really learning who everyone is. And the work that must have gone into the writing was evident, because I don't think things pour out in that form. It was just such wonderful writing. Really great.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pat.
I appreciate that you trust us to hear these stories, because there's a lot that goes into writing them and experiencing them and reading them to a crowd.
Right.
True.
Yeah, we all in the writers group have become very open and vulnerable with each other. So I think it got us to the point where we felt comfortable enough to be open and vulnerable with people that aren't in the writing group.
But that are in our chapter.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Right. So when I heard them, it just made me feel that I love you all just a little bit more.
Oh, nice.
The
Well,
quality,
that is one good thing about TTN is we grow closer from the things that we do together. Go ahead, Mara. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. The quality of the writing is stunning. It's really amazing. I was, aware and awake the entire time. It was very entertaining. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Mary, can you turn your video on while we close out the meeting so we can see you? There you
There you
go.
are. All right, well, we're all here. What a wonderful meeting. Thank you everyone for being so vulnerable and for respecting our vulnerability. And is it next month we have the holiday party that Maureen is going to have some fun things to do?
Yes, and I want to thank Roberta, who just sent me some ideas for fun things. So, and anyone else has some ideas, we are going to do stuff together. I'm not exactly sure what yet completely, but we'll do it.
And if you need help, I'm more than happy to split it up with you.
Okay. And Susie,
Whoops.
Donna and I will need a dress rehearsal prior to, and Donna, I will get with you and share what Roberta has provided. We'll, yeah, we're going to do some stuff. I think we're going to play bingo. But a kind that you won't expect. How's that?
I think Roberta sent you some ideas because she felt guilty volunteering you to do this while your video wasn't working.
Well, when I got back to the video and found out I had volunteered, and people were so thankful that I volunteered. Yeah. Oh, it's like, yeah, okay. And when you all see the minutes that I am writing, and then I'm in red, you will see what I am volunteering for you all to do.
Oh, boy. You're going to draft us, huh?
You're already
drafted you.
It's done. It's written, and so it shall be done. So.
That's great. So who's researching about the charity for next month? Who's doing that?
That was Mary. Mary, you knew.
Mary Greenlee.
Yes.
Excellent. So Mary will get back to us with that. And don't forget to sign up. Susie will put it in on the website, and when she does, she'll send out a thing and you'll sign up.
Yes,
and
I sent out the one-liner thing.
Yeah.
And according to my notes from the last meeting, I have a few days left yet to come up with the big blurb, which I'll be doing. And Donna, I'll get with you on that big blurb, which I'll send.
Okay.
And please make sure that I have the date right, December 20th.
December 20th, right?
That's what I have. Okay, good. Be there or be square. So there you go.
Are we supposed to wear our Christmas outfits?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
That's a great idea, Mary.
Yeah.
Yes.
And or Hanukkah outfits, either one.
Or holiday ugly sweaters would be nice. Of variety that you would like. Yes. We might
Ugly
have
sweater.
we might have a contest. Yes.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah, we could, yes. So be thinking about that. I'll put that in the big blurb. We're your holiday kitschiest, ugliest stuff of whatever holiday you happen to be celebrating on December 20th.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, this was a wonderful meeting. Thank you everyone for showing up. You're all rock stars. We appreciate you.
Donna,
Yeah.
I have something to say because some of you had written some of these very insightful pieces, and I only heard them one other time. This time I saw such a control over what you were saying and feeling that I was really respectful of, because some of these things are so dear and near to your hearts that it's hard to present, but everybody did that tonight. It was really remarkable.
Yeah, and it was good to hear yours again, Mary, because I don't think I heard it all the first time, or I didn't take it in. But it was good to hear it again, so.
It's good to hear things at least 3 times. Then maybe you've got it, maybe.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, so, well, let's see. We aren't gonna meet in person, so we'll see you at the next meeting a month from now. What other things do we have going? Have a nice holiday. What
Happy
else?
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So you know, I'm in Chicago because I got a notice saying my vacation points were gonna expire at the end of the year and I had to travel or lose them. So I'm in Chicago. We're at the Hilton on the Magnificent Mile. We're here for 3 days. We're checking out tomorrow. And then right after Thanksgiving, we go to, we fly to Denver and we go to Dillon, Colorado for a week. And then we fly home. And then a week later, we fly back out to Phoenix and go up to Sedona, the Grand
Oh.
Canyon, and then Scottsdale to visit my cousin and then back home. And all of these vacations, the last minute. So that's what
Well,
I'm,
good.
They'll be good for the travel log.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
you go.
Yep,
just have to remember my camera this time.
yeah.
That's
Well,
good.
have safe travels and
Yeah.
hopefully all your flights will be on time and
That's
you will
right.
have passengers on your plane that behave themselves.
Yes.
Right, so important. Please be civilized.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being part of our organization. Love you guys. I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
It was
Bye, everybody.
wonderful.
Bye. Bye.
Great meeting.
Bye.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great meeting.
Thanks. Bye, Anna. Okay. Well, it's just us 3, now us 2.
Yeah. Just wanted to do a check-in. Are you okay?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's I don't know, you don't know what's going on really, but basically my brother's in jail. He violated his probation by not showing up for detox. And now he's in jail because of it, and he has to go before a judge on Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. The judge may throw him in jail for the year and a half to fill out his sentence. Hopefully he will send him to rehab because my brother gave up the bed that was reserved for him because he didn't want to go. And now he's in jail waiting for a bed and the judge to say it's okay.
Oh, Roberta, or Donna, I'm sorry, you're still recording. So I just saw that. It's all right.